Hello, and welcome to our short mini lesson today where we look at instructional best practices. Okay, and then very quickly, we're going to review here what those two best practices that we're examining are. The first one will be engagement, and we're going to be using a program called Edpuzzle. Your teacher learning objective is to create an engaging lesson for third grade students that reviews telling time to the nearest minute using Edpuzzle. And the student learning objective is telling time to the nearest minute. It's really important to always examine your student learning objective when you're creating online lessons for elementary students, because everything should align to that objective. So our best practice is engagement, and then we're going to use Edpuzzle to exemplify that student learning objective of telling time. Our second best practice that we're going to look at is motivation with gamification. Gamification is a huge trend right now, and motivation is a key to online learning and also one of the greater challenges that we run into. Your teacher learning objective for this is to create and launch a GIM kit that reviews multiplication facts using gamification as your tool for motivation. And of course, we have a student learning objective, which is multiply and divide within 100 fluently, recalling memory for your all products. So students using memorization to help them be able to recall those facts. All right. So our first learning objective here is using that Edpuzzle for engagement. I'm going to go ahead and put us into Edpuzzle. All right. Okay. So you can see in this program, and this is you do have a free version or a paid version. It's very easy to use. When we think about engagement, you want your students to have different activities and different access points to keep them focused on the learning. The other thing that's huge about engagement is to build relationship and reduce that transactional distance between you and the screen and your students. All right, so I do have pre-recorded videos in here just for the sake of time. And of course, we know our student learning objective is telling time to the nearest minute. Edpuzzle lets you do things very easily for the sake of engagement. In this case, you would choose add content, and of course, you're creating a playlist, which I have right here. As I said, these are pre-recorded lessons, and I'm going to show you what engagement looks like in each of these pieces. Now, one thing that helps with engagement is sort of that idea of chunking or micro-learning, where each piece sort of has a stop point where students practice their learning so that they can stay focused and engaged on that learning objective. All right, let's take a look-see at my first element that's in my playlist. So right here, I just introduce students to what they're learning for the day, and then I also do a quick check-in. I'm checking in with that student affect, meaning how are you feeling about learning? How are your peers feeling? Is a great way to get them engaged and feel connected right away. And I use this program here called Ziplet. It's a whiteboard space. Students just enter this code. They type in there how they feel. They can respond to how peers are feeling. It's a very, very quick activity. It gets them engaged right off the bat, and then they're ready to learn. Now, the nice thing about Edpuzzle is they can't skip ahead through any of these videos, which is huge. When we talk about engagement and, of course, relevant learning, students need to be able to be kind of like checked on making sure that they stay with whatever the material is that they're supposed to stay with. So we start off by engaging them using that online whiteboard where we kind of check in and see how they're feeling. The next way that I engage students, and Edpuzzle really makes it easy for this, is by having them use paper and pencil. Yes, paper and pencil. It's online learning, but they can still do things in the real world that helps them to feel engaged and accountable to their learning. And in this case, students will be writing in a math journal. They have a prompt here. They'll write down some definitions on telling time. And then there is an accountability check where they just have to take a screenshot of their math journal to make sure that they completed that work. So that engagement comes from outside of the screen that then you keep them accountable with by having them share it inside of the screen. All righty. The next thing that we do inside of this lesson here with Edpuzzle, we had our whiteboard space, we have our paper and pencil, and then we will do a little bit of a review, and that comes right here. And this is a really neat part of Edpuzzle that I just love. Inside of each short little mini lesson that I put all together to make sort of this overall lesson, you have the option to pause the lesson and insert questions, which I've already done. You can see here I have an open-ended question. I've got 2 different ones, and they come at different points inside this video. So students have to engage with the video that I made. They can do it asynchronously, which is great, but they're still having to engage. And then they respond to the prompt, which Edpuzzle puts right in here for you as a teacher. You just have to plug and play. All right. The last thing that I have students doing for engagement in this mini lesson is right here, and this is super helpful. I can actually take the link from their textbook, and I plugged it right into this video within Edpuzzle, and they practice with their textbook answering questions related to their student learning objective. And I'm going to show you very quickly. Here are those questions. And each of these, you can see it says clock 1, clock 2, clock 3. They come throughout the course of this little short recorded video where they have to then engage with the materials. And then you, as the educator, are able to sort of check for understanding, because when they submit it, you can see all of their responses on these questions, which gives you a great point of review or reinforcement on your follow-on lesson. All right, lastly in here, I do have a brief wrap up, and I wanted to show this to you. Inside the wrap up here, students will actually go into another program, I'll zoom in here for you, called Seesaw, and they'll practice what they learn from their Edpuzzle in a different learning space, which helps with engagement, especially kind of in our K-5 learners, where it's easy to get kind of bored on those lengthy lessons inside of one program. So here they have the opportunity to engage with another program called Seesaw to just really practice their learning as far as our student objective of telling time. All right, now the next best practice that we're going to look at here is going to be motivation. Okay, let me pull you over to Gimkit quick. Okay, here we go. So Gimkit is an example of gamification. And when we think about student motivation, which is our best practice that we're also focusing on, students are definitely motivated by gamification. It relates to the video games that they experience in their everyday environment. They're very easy for teachers to implement. And of course, that competitive aspect where students can win points or prizes helps them to feel connected and really motivated sometimes to place in the high top 3 in their class. So Gimkit is a program that's amazing because there's a free version. There's a paid version too. It's only about $10, which is well worth the money if you find that your students are definitely motivated by a gamification type of ed tech tool. And Gimkit does a great job. It has all of these different questions on different topics that are already pre-made. It has a pretty extensive library. So the only thing that you have to do as an educator is decide what your goal is, your student learning objective. And as I had stated, it's going to be practicing those basic multiplication facts. And you have an option in here to assign it live or as homework. And either way works great. I would really recommend that sometimes when you're putting these programs out online using some gamification to motivate your kiddos, that you do set up live play times, because then you're there, your students are there, you're all connected together. And that relational component is also a huge part of motivation. So playing it live is a lot of fun. And again, as I mentioned, that motivates students to be really sort of responsible for their time, for their learning time, because they want to be there with you. You know, they're motivated by relationship, and of course, they're motivated by that gamified piece. So here are just some of the different activities that you can pick. These are featured ones. Of course, I have tons on here because I do have the paid variety. I play this one a lot with my students, Fishtopia. They love it because, of course, the goal is always who can beat Miss Van. And then I do offer prizes for winners, which they love. You just choose your game, push continue. You have these little options here to alter sort of the parameters on the game. And then you play live. I found that it is a little bit tricky here when I do Google Meet to continue into the play live, just because it kind of causes some issues with Google Meet. But once you play the game, it's easy. It plays for that duration, and then it does print out an analytics so that you can see how your kids did. And being able to see how they did is a huge part of online learning. I know that's not necessarily when we think about motivation, but all parts of your teaching processes should always come back to, have I assessed my students? what are they learning? Are they learning? And what do I need to do differently? So again, GimKit here, great program for building motivation because you're using that gamified aspect of online learning. All right. We're going to cut back over here into our Google Meet. All right. So as I mentioned, we practiced very, very briefly looking at two different best practices. One was engagement, and we used Edpuzzle as an ed tech to help you use different programs and different access points and different types of lesson break apart to help keep your students engaged. And then we looked at motivation using that gamified tool called GimKit, which gives students sort of a competition between themselves and the teacher to help them stay motivated inside of their learning. So I hope that you got just a little bit of information about those two best practices, motivation and engagement, in our short video lesson today.